This is Call with Dad's podcast, where today's issues, concerns, and joys of being a dad are discussed, with your hosts E.A. Maynard and Mr. Pancake sharing their views, experiences, and all things they know. Join the journey with us. Welcome to Call with Dads, more than a podcast or a website, but your home for a community of dads who want to be better. Now let's get started.
A big part of, the basis for my content all kind of began with the realization that that if I were able to become a better husband and improve my marriage, that everything else in my life would kind of fall into place. And that has certainly seemed to be the case. It's kind of the most important, it is, in my opinion, the most important relationship that you'll have in your life. Interestingly enough, it's one of the few situations where you have a family member that you actually have the opportunity to choose, right? As opposed to them being thrust upon you.
Right.
Also has its pros and cons, right? But my point stands. So to start there, I've kind of found over the years, researching different personal development mindsets and gurus, whatever you want to call them, that it seems to be that one of the first steps you can do to improve any of your relationships is to improve yourself. And so that kind of is where a lot of my content focuses on, is becoming worthwhile and competent and effective and valuable in your own right. Because men, as a result of the circumstances that we're born into, are in many ways required to create or justify our own level of value. And one of the ways that men can do that is by becoming competent. I say the word worthwhile a lot because that term specifically means worth another person's time. And to me, it speaks volumes, right? As to what, to sit down and contemplate what it actually means to be a worthwhile man, right? A man that's worth somebody else's time. And that's even most true in relation to your wife, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. It's, I know that before I got married, a lot of the relationships I had, I really didn't focus much on the relationship as I should have. And, I wasn't happy. They weren't happy after I got married. And it took me a while to get that mindset right, to where you had to kind of get in the right place to be able to have a good marriage, to have that good life. And you can't have one without the other, at least not from what I've seen, where if you're basically slouching on the couch when you come home and becoming just, I think last time we talked, drinking all the time and letting yourself slide down to rock bottom to where your wife is sitting there thinking, what did I marry? Kind of defeats the purpose of the marriage, because you both have to work to be somebody the other wants. So,
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of guys, well, there's a lot there to unpack. So a lot of guys, they're more than willing to do the hard work to appear as though they're valuable in the beginning of a relationship, and fair enough, right? Why
right.
wouldn't they want to appear valuable? It's much easier to appear valuable than it is to become valuable, right? Mm-hmm. So in the throes of early relationships, they tend to do all the work that they can to appear valuable. But the problem with appearances is that they fall apart, right? So you enter into the marriage, and then in some ways you've kind of, and this is a common complaint in the manosphere, if you will, too, is that, well, they sold me a false bill of goods, right? She got heavy after we got married, or she started complaining all the time, or she's never willing to have sex with me, or she just wore makeup all the time and now she doesn't have the makeup on and she's actually, right? You hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, the same argument could be made for men, the kind of men you were just talking about, that kind of, they start the relationship off at a sprint, and then next thing you know, they're coming home slouching on the couch and drinking beer every night while they watch football, and then they wonder why their relationship's falling apart. It's like, well, because your wife was sold a false bill of goods, right? The same argument that many men make about women.
Right. And that's the sad thing is, and don't get me wrong, there's days like yesterday I was just exhausted to all ends, where I was lack of sleep, all this. I mean, my daughter was having trouble sleeping the night before. So, and my wife understood. Yesterday, I was just basically worthless. I got the dishes done, went to bed early, blah, blah, blah. But I can't be in that position every day. I can't.
Right.
And neither her or I are the types that, and that's kind of what drew us together. And we knew in 4 months of dating that we was going to get married, because we got married, I think it was 4 months to the day that we started dating. Mm-hmm. But we also knew that both of us had drive. Both of us wanted something more. It wasn't, oh, I just want to sit. Oh, all I want to do is come home and do nothing. Mm-hmm. Neither of us demonstrated that in the least. My wife constantly studying for, as soon as the kids are asleep, she's studying. She's trying to get better. Me, I'm doing this. I'm doing other things as well to try to grow the family, make things better for us. And I've seen friends of mine who have, when they were younger, before they got married, they were all active, all much more outgoing than I was, who now they've gotten fat, or they've gotten lazy, or they complain about their wife complaining to them, and all they want to do is go hang out with the guys. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have my neighbor I hang out with once a week, if even that. And, most times it's my family is my focus. Mm-hmm. And I think people forget that throughout history, family has been the most important thing for a reason, because friends, they come and go. And I mean, I've ragged on this issue about your kids are not your friends. You can be friendly with them, but being a parent is a much higher level than friends. Mm-hmm. And you want that family, to me at least, you want that family to be the crown and jewel in that person's life, because they should be able to depend on your family throughout life. And they, if I'm not mistaken, they your kids model themselves after you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a good point too, and that touches on the other part of the original inquiry too, was that how can we improve our family? And it seems like the answer is very similar, isn't it? Right? Because if we lead by example, if our children pay much more attention to what we do than they do to what we say, then it seems that improving ourselves and becoming a better person would absolutely be the first step in improving our family, right? And also encouraging our kids to grow up and become people who value themselves. And you touched on a few things there early on, and your comment too about complaining, like, oh, my wife was complaining, she was, well, and that made me think of a lot of things too, as well. In a relationship, this is a common complaint that men make as well, as like, well, I washed the dishes and she didn't say anything, right? She didn't say thank you. She didn't even bring up the fact that I did the dishes. And it's like, well, yeah, you never do the dishes, And like, yeah, well, I did the dishes tonight and she didn't even say anything. It's like, well, okay, men desire appreciation. That's one of the big things we look for in a relationship, right? We want our wife to be the president of our fan club. And so it hurts our soul, right, when she criticizes us. And then you say to yourself, well, I did the dishes tonight and she never said thank you. It's like, well, no, because just like anything in life, our brain is trained to recognize patterns, right? So if she recognizes a pattern of you never doing the dishes, you doing the dishes one time as a fluke, it's not even going to register on her radar.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's just so out of the ordinary. It's like, well, this isn't even part of the data. I'm just going to throw that out. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you do the dishes, for a couple weeks, or you start doing the dishes a couple times a week for the next month or two, and I promise you, she's going to start to notice. You know what I mean? But you've got to be willing to put the work in and not, throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were, as soon as things go south. Yeah. And men have fragile egos. That's the reason why that is such a strong need for us in a relationship. The need, like I said, for our wife to be the president of our fan club is our egos are fragile, and we do a good job of kind of building up the armor and kind of defending ourselves against the harsh criticisms of the world or of other people. But there's something about our wife that it just always cuts so deep. And I think that in a way, using the same symbolism of like building up armor, in some regards, our wife is like inside the armor, right? It's like because we take her in as a part of ourselves and agree to protect her as if she were ourselves. And so in a way, she's, inside the armor. So it makes sense that her criticism would cut so much more harshly than any other.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. I was going with the thought of your wife helps you put on your armor. Your wife helps you keep it on by keeping you strong, and et cetera, et cetera. Similar, just different mindsets, I guess. I have a weird mind.
It kind of goes along the lines of her being the biggest fan club. You're right. The metaphor works that way as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I try to, with how my life is with my wife and I, we 2 kids, which 2 kids isn't extraordinary, but still both of us have full-time jobs, homeschooling, all this stuff, busy, hectic life. And most times we're not sitting there going, oh, you filled the dishwasher. Thank you. Like normally I do dishes, no big deal. My wife did them last night because again, I was just a lump of sack of nothing and she helped me out. I noticed it this morning after she left and I haven't yet to say thank you for doing it, which I need to and all this, but it's one of those things that it's there. I didn't think about it. We're busy.
Right.
And we need to remember that, and I'm no exclusion of this, but like you're saying, we have to at least recognize our wives as much as we want them to recognize us.
Well, and it works the other way too, right? I mean, it's not as intense, we'll say, because there's another biological mechanism that's at play there, and that's our brain's propensity to notice bad things much more prevalent than we notice good things, right? So we talk about you never doing the dishes, and then all of a sudden you do them, and she doesn't say thank you. Well, because it didn't register. But you do the dishes all the time, and then you don't do the dishes one night. The same law applies that she's not as likely to notice, but she's slightly more likely to notice that because it's a bad thing, right? So she notices it because there's dishes everywhere. You know what I mean? She doesn't notice it because you were a sad sack of lazy whatever.
Right.
She just notices it because there's dishes everywhere, and she's much more inclined to say something. But again, our fragile ego, it's all weighted the same, right? Right.
Yeah.
We don't have a weighting system inside of our brain that's like, well, this criticism is, more intense than this one because of all these variables. No, we don't have that ability. You know what I mean? It's all the same.
Right. Which makes sense. And sadly enough, and that's the one thing that I've noticed is we all kind of go with that. Well, I'm doing everything. I'm doing it all, and we don't pay attention to what the other person's doing. Let me ask you, what do you find is the best trick to start with for men to actually try to build that better relationship with the marriage? What would you say the first step they need to take is?
So there's this gentleman that I listen to a lot. His name is Jim Rohn, and he has this. He planted this idea in my mind a long time ago in one of his talks. He's passed away now, but I was listening to one of his talks, and he's saying, if you want to be wealthy, study wealth, right? If you want to be happy, study happiness, and I think that translates, right? So if you want to have a happy marriage, study your wife, right? And I think that's the first step a lot of men can take, because men are so caught up in the constant nagging of everyday life that it's difficult for us sometimes to divide our perception, right? And it's super important for young husbands particularly to focus a portion of their time on listening to what their wife has to say, listening to not only what she says, but to the way she says it, and then also just making your wife a study. And I don't mean like a specimen in a laboratory, but I just mean like, that she is a discipline that needs to be investigated, right? You wouldn't walk onto the job your first day as a plumber and expect to be, I don't know much about plumbing, but you wouldn't expect to do some extremely difficult job that takes years to master, right? It's the same thing with your wife. You're not going to walk into a marriage on day one and have the best marriage that God ever created because you're inexperienced. You know what I mean? You're bound to make some mistakes, but treat it like a discipline. Treat it like your job. You know what I mean? Every man wants to be better. Most men want to be better at their jobs. It's kind of just a natural drive that we inherit. So the same is true, should be true about our wives, right? She's a thing to be investigated, a thing to be studied, a thing to be learned, and then apply that knowledge, right? And,
Right.
Yeah, that's probably number one. And then obviously aside from improving yourself, but those two things really should occur simultaneously, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but in all truth, most guys, they're, or not even just guys, it seems like most people tend to get in the, well, I'll do this, and then after 4 months, it's okay, I've done this and it's not paying off, or I'm not seeing a benefit, this and that. And they don't see it because they see the little increments every day of the changes, things getting better. So because they don't recognize that, I think a lot of people quit and go back to old ways. Because I know, like me, when I started working out, as an example, I didn't notice any difference. And then one day, all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, you look like you lost weight, or you look like this. And I'm sitting there thinking, really, I don't think I did, but okay. And it's that thing is, and that's the best way I can relate it is people need to, at least what I'm thinking from what you said is, to build that habit, you need to make a habit that you're going to stick with and do it in a way so you discipline yourself if you do it like a job.
Yeah.
Because people, I think that's a big problem today is people, they expect to go into their jobs nowadays knowing everything or feel like they know everything. And when somebody says, hey, you don't want to use that plumber glue because it just doesn't hold, that's only good for temporary blah blah blah, you need this.
Right.
Yeah, the little tricks.
Well, and that's funny because it kind of speaks a little bit to the societal decline of the apprenticeship program too. In some respects, it feels like as a society we're kind of getting away from that mentality. We have so many entry level jobs. People you're either running equipment or you're working in service or you're right. These things that don't require a lot of aptitude, and that's fine. But there are still plenty of jobs out there that require years and years of study to master. And I would say that your marriage is probably the epitome of that. And it's interesting too, because another thing you touched on with the whole physical fitness thing was that there's another personal development phrase that's pretty common that I've always liked, and it's what gets measured gets managed, right? And it's kind of the same thing with working out, where you mentioned, well, I could go 6-7 months, and someone mentions, oh, hey, you look good, and you're like, oh, really? I don't really think it's that big of a difference. But if you look back at the data you took from 6 months ago, right, and you're like, oh man, it's numbers, right? It's easy. Jim Rohn has another thing about that. He makes a joke about a car salesman asking, how many calls did you make, John? And he's like, no, John, is not going to fit in this little box. I need a number. How many calls did you make, John? Right? The point being is that it doesn't matter. All the excuses are irrelevant. I just need to know the data, because the data is going to tell me how many cars you're going to sell. Right. What I mean? And it's true same with the working out. It's true about marriages too. And people might say, well, it's difficult to track marriage. It is. Well, be inventive, right? So, maybe a good way to use, I'm part of an accountability, started an accountability community that we can talk about later.
All right.
But that's kind of one of the big tenets about it, is using the SMART goal system and OKI, which is objectives and key indicators. So it's a whole system. There's a post about it on my page. But the idea is essentially, so if your objective is to have a better marriage, then what are some of your key performance indicators? Because that's how you're going to make progress. Well, we're going to have one date night a month. Okay, perfect. That's good. We're going to spend a half hour reading together every night. I don't know, whatever it is, right? My wife loves when I brush her hair, so I'm going to brush her hair tonight, every night before bed, right? And then at the end of the week, you can say, well, John, how many times did you do it? Well, 3. Well, there's 7 days in a week, John. You know what I mean? You only did 3. You know what I mean? It's like kind of, oh, okay, I get it. And you can kind of start to see the picture get put together over time, and you'll see that. But not only will you be feeling the consequences of your improvement, but you'll be able to track it, right? Yeah.
Right. Which makes sense. So, and that's, the accountability, I think, is a major thing that people are missing nowadays, like you are going on with, is it's easy to, I don't know. In my profession, I designed restaurants, and
I recall that.
yeah, so for me, a lot of it was, and I'm using my personal life as an example here, is when I started off, I would put out a drawing and I would Google stuff, and every drawing I had to go to, I knew it was going to an architect. I knew it was going to the health department. I knew it was going to all these different people that were expecting me to have this looking right. So to do it, I had to, and mind you, there's a lot involved in all this, but at the same token, it's not like I'm figuring out the building strength for a column to hold up the building.
Right. I got you.
So it's not rocket science or structural engineering, but at the same time, I have to make sure that I'm getting everything right, because one mistake is going to lead the health department to say no, or the engineers to say, hey, this doesn't equal up, which could cause the client money. So the accountability that goes into one person doing one thing throughout a whole process. And I try to use this mentality or this thinking with my kids in my life, is because I know if you start the drawing, start planning how things are supposed to be and how they're supposed to look, everybody else can do what's needed and build that building or build that restaurant or build whatever you're trying to build to make it work and make it beautiful and make it functional, or put out excellent food, or if you're a cheap restaurant, put out cheap food for people that doesn't want to spend money. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, it's a good point, and systems like that, function so well for many of the reasons you just described. And although a marriage is similar, right? It is a project that needs to be completed, right? Maybe completed is not the right word, because I would argue that a marriage is never actually complete. But you know what I mean? It's a project that needs to be worked on. So it's similar in that respect, but it doesn't have anywhere near the same number of systems in place, right, that the situation like you described does. And that's one of the downsides. So like building a restaurant, that it functions and runs so smoothly because of, and maybe there's some downsides to it as well. I'm sure there are, but it runs so smoothly because of the fact that so many people are involved, right? There's a guy to check this and a guy to check that and a guy to check that, and they're all getting paid. So they've all got skin in the game. And it's not just skin in the game, but it's concrete skin in the game. I mean, it's numbers on a page. You can't get much more concrete than that, right?
Right.
I know X number of dollars is going to go or going to come based on the decisions that I make.
Right.
And in a marriage, it's not like that, right? It's not concrete numbers on a page. Yeah, there's, alimony and child support and all these other financial consequences that come as a result of breaking up, but it's nothing clear cut, right? It's like off in the future, right? It's like this, ethereal thing that people talk about, but you don't really understand the impact of it until it happens, right? And there's only two people involved in a marriage. Now, there's not 30 people that are holding each other accountable, right? Or that are checking everybody's work. There's only two people. Right. And it's two people that are both biased because they both think they're right and the other person's wrong. They both think that they're the victim and that the other person is the perpetrator. They both believe that they shouldn't have to do the work because it's the other person's fault, right? They're both individual people that have an inability oftentimes to see a situation from another person's perspective. So it's just everything's working against you, man. It's a miracle that marriages work out at all, to be honest. You know what I mean? But it's because of the effort and the input of good men, and men that are willing to step back and take stock and recognize the situation for what it is and are willing to move forward, that makes the whole organization work so well.
Right. Now, the one thing that's with how you said it's a miracle that marriages even work now, I absolutely agree. There's times that I've wondered the same thing on.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, every one of us guys have sat there, and I'm sure wives have sat there and said, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But overall, if you're doing it right, it's going to make it work, and it'll make it worth it. And there's no reason you'd ever really want to get out other than to momentarily grumble about something.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is sticking in my head for some reason is today's society seems to be like I look back at my mom and stepdad, for an example. They fought occasionally. I never saw it personally, but my mom and I talked about it after I was older and he's passed away and all this. And, you know, to me, I saw them as a good marriage, as what it should be. He was a good guy. He basically, when he passed, he had, I think, 6 city blocks of traffic for his procession. And as far as I know, he was the largest funeral and procession in that city's history. So
Oh,
it says a lot about his character. The fact
sure.
is using that as an example to look at, you see all this. Now, when kids see stuff, they see that, oh, you come from a married family? That's kind of weird. You come from this. Or they see celebrities that for some reason parents let their kids worship celebrities instead of
Mm,
worshiping either Christianity, religion, whatever religion you are, or focusing on the good things in the family, things like that.
right.
Whatever your main focus is, but I don't think celebrities should be it personally. But you see society focusing on all these external negatives. Well, this celebrity got married and then 3 months later got divorced. It was no big deal. Everyone forgot about it. They've been married 17 times and blah, blah, blah. Or Johnny, his mom and dad been divorced. His dad's getting remarried. The mom has like a couple boyfriends, whatever it is. Those are the things that today's society finds to be okay. Now, I'm not saying if you got divorced not to get remarried or what so have you, but it feels like divorce is becoming almost a common status symbol. I don't know if I want to call it a status symbol. I'm not sure what I really want to call it, to be honest with you. But it becomes a common thing that people are looking at going, well, yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's acceptable. It's normal. Instead of back in the day, it was, oh, yeah, I didn't want to get divorced. I'm embarrassed about it, where people really felt bad about going through a divorce.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's a good point. I mean, I think that our culture in general has trended more towards a disposable, um, just mindset about most things in general, and it's to the detriment of marriages because we sometimes see marriages the same way. Whereas I grew up in a culture where marriages were the complete opposite of disposable, right?
Right.
um, you entered into a marriage and you made a vow, and it was a lifetime commitment, and you made it work. And I'm not saying that, and I get a lot of pushback from people because, I say I don't agree with divorce, and I'm like, I know that's a broad statement. There are obviously some nuances to that, but I would say in general, I think that the majority of divorces that occur are unnecessary if the people are willing to put the work in to make the marriage, improve. You got married for a reason, right? And you talked about it being a status symbol too. Yeah, I mean, as proud as I am to consider myself a husband, and as proud as I am to tell people the number of years that I've been married, the number of children that I have, I do treat all these things almost like badges of honor. But I think
Right.
that there's some potential downsides to that point of view as well, because I heard a saying today that you should find a woman that wants a marriage and not just a wedding. And I think that's kind of the same thing, right? You talk about these celebrities and things like that are getting married, and marriage is a status symbol. And I think that goes along the same idea of getting married because you want a wedding, not because you want a marriage.
Right. And I mean, what what do you think men, because like I said, with that becoming the common norm now, or at least it feels like people are looking at divorce as a common norm. What because I understand some people getting divorced, the reasons they get divorced. Like you said, I'm personally, I told my wife, we got married when I was 30 something, my mid 30s, something like that. And I told her, I'm like, for better or worse, if this doesn't work out, I'm only getting married once. if it doesn't work out, I'm not getting married again. Don't think that this is just going to be like some random relationship.
Right.
Again, these are things that we talked about because we knew each other 4 months almost to the day that we got married. So most people, they date forever and then they have the mentality of, well, I've dated this person for 10 years, I might as well marry them. And then they expect everything to change the moment they get married. And once things change, then, or once things don't change or get better, then they feel like they just get divorced because it's the easiest thing to do. To me,
Yeah, well, I mean, everything does change, right? I mean, not necessarily in the way you're describing it, but certainly everything changes. I mean, that's the whole point. That's why people wait to get married so long. And I feel like the phenomenon you just described about people waiting so long to get married today is kind of this byproduct of the conflict between this modern disposable ideology that we have, and then this, the last bastion of traditionalism, right? That we have this institution of marriage, right? This last bastion of traditional culture, classic culture, and it's like this weird juxtaposition where these two things are in conflict with one another, right? Because part of me still holds dear the sanctity of marriage, but then also part of me understands that everything nowadays is disposable and, you know what I mean, easy to get rid of. So I'm going to just hold off on making this commitment as long as possible so that I can step away at any point and maintain the disposability, but without the shame of having a broken marriage, right?
right, which I find kind of weird that, and there's a lot of things obviously I don't understand. And like, I can honestly say I've dated people for multiple years, and there was even a girl that I was engaged with for multiple years, and we ended up splitting up. And knowing that the longest relationship I've had right now in my life has been my marriage, and that started off with a 4 months dating, got married, and then the roller coaster began.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying everyone should obviously go out and get married after dating somebody 4 months.
No, but you understood the assignment.
I did. And we both had, and it sounds weird, but the initial marriage wasn't all emotional. You know what I mean? Where everybody seems to have, oh, well, I'm so in love. Love is the key. There was benefits to my wife and I getting married other than just being married. And we both understood the benefits of what we brought to each other's lives, things like that. But I think a lot of people are just more focused on love. Love will conquer all. That's the line that movies and Disney and Hallmark and Lifetime Channel's been feeding people for years and years, is love will conquer all. And I think that even us guys, we kind of have, even though we're just hard as a rock and straightforward, stiff whatever, we're just at the point of nothing's going to phase us. I think a lot of guys still have that mindset as well of, well, I love my wife. I love my wife so I can make it through anything. As long as I love her, no matter what, I'll make it through. And they don't think, kind of like you were saying, you need to work on yourself. And I think, and correct me or fix my way of thinking if you would, if I'm wrong here, but I think that with that mindset, people are letting everything else go because they believe their emotional mindset's going to fix every problem. And like I said, me and my wife, we knew that there was more than just emotional to us getting married.
Well, I think you're 100% correct. I mean, I think that's a huge failing of the modern day marriage institution, right? I don't know where that concept came from, but the concept I'm speaking of is what you mentioned, the idea that love
Conquers all.
that love will resolve any issue in a marriage, that as long as we are in love. That's not true. I was fortunate enough that my father-in-law had a conversation with me before I got married. My father-in-law is very traditional, very religious. I'm not, broadly speaking, and but I did the respectful thing, and I asked him to marry my wife at the time, and he had this long conversation with me about marriage, and one of the things he said is, he's like, "Oh, there's going to come a point in your marriage where it's no longer going to be easy, and you're going to have to choose to love your wife." And I was thinking to myself, like, what? Love is a choice? Like, what does that even mean? And that concept just kind of shattered like my understanding of the idea of love. And I mentioned to my daughter the other day. She's 13, and I probably traumatized her, but I told her, I said, love. I said, marriage has nothing to do with love. And she was like, what? All the Disney movies and romance novels that I've read up till now have been lying to me? I'm like, yeah. It has nothing to do with love. Nothing. You know what I mean? It's two people agreeing that they're going to spend the rest of their lives working on something together. You know what I mean? It's Jordan Peterson says it. He says that it's agreeing that no matter how effed up I find out you actually are, I'm not going anywhere. As long as you agree that no matter how effed up you find out I actually am, you're not going anywhere. Right? That's marriage.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And, I like that phrase. I think you've said it before. And no matter how effed up you are, you quoted Jordan Peterson. And
yeah. It's such a good concept. I feel like it's such a great summary of what marriage is,
I think
good marriage.
Oh, yeah. I think after you mentioned Jordan Peterson's book of 12 Rules, I went out and got the audiobook of it and listened to it. And I'm sitting there going, like, now I understand it. Like, I'm actually planning on going back and listen to it again, kind of.
It's so good.
Well, I'm one of those people that I can listen to or read a book or whatever it is a couple times because I know there's more information that you get through the second or third time.
Sure.
But there's also that section about parenting and all this in there too. And
yeah.
But yeah,
your children do things that make you dislike them.
Well,
Perfect parenting advice.
That's kind of where I got the line of, I think I've started saying it after I read it, was you want to raise your kids to be somebody that you want to spend time with them when they get older.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
that's kind of where I even pushed me a little bit more away from gentle parenting because it seems like gentle parenting is all about your emotions and the kids' emotions and all this. And I know when I see an adult that's all focused on my emotions, I'm sitting there going, you annoy the heck out of me. Go away. So, and my wife's at the same point of, it's good you feel that way, but let's get back to reality and get things done. Yeah. And don't get me wrong. We both, and that's the thing is, we both agree, hey, we have to try to be nice and be loving to our kids, and we have to do all this stuff. And I think another thing that dads do, I know I'm a sucker at this as well, is I get so focused on the kids and all this. Like my wife and I, what was it, a couple of days ago, she said something, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I work all day just like you do. I had to pick up the kids. I'm taking care of them while you have to drive an hour through DC traffic, which is probably just as frustrating as dealing with a screaming child. And we're both stressed, frustrated by the time dinner's on the table and what so have you, that we both just want to zone out as soon as the kids are asleep. And, that once you have kids, it's like I think a lot of things for my wife and I, for an example, changed once we had kids, which changed our marriage dynamics. It's not, well, let's go to a movie. Let's go to the park. Let's go do this. Let's do all these things like we used to do. Like I used to be able to tell you where some of the greatest Chinese restaurants that I couldn't even order from because I didn't speak English at. And I loved the food. Don't get me wrong. I just wish I knew how to speak the language to say, what am I eating? You know what I mean? But luckily my wife never ordered me anything that wasn't good. So, but that's the whole thing of, we get so focused on one thing that it's easy to forget, hey, we have a new mission, we're growing. And I think a big part that people forget is being married. Part of that is having kids. And expanding your family and expanding your memory and legacy and all these things.
Yeah, I agree. I take issue with the supposition that you need children to make a marriage, because I have had people make that claim before. They're like, "Well, your marriage doesn't start until you have kids." And I'm like, your marriage is different after you have kids.
Yes,
Definitely true, but I'm gonna be cautious about valuing one against the other.
maybe I misworded it. So
No, you didn't. I don't think you made this claim. I'm just
Okay.
saying, for people that are listening that might assume that this is the mentality. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's definitely different. Your marriage will change drastically after you have children. I totally agree with you there. Yeah. Well, Mr. Pancakes hasn't. He jumped in and hasn't said a word.
I know, quite
Yeah,
quiet.
Yeah, sorry. I just kind of had to jump in and wanted to kind of listen before I just started. Oh yeah, so and so. I
You're good.
don't know what I'm talking
How you
about. Yeah, I kind of sorry for the tardiness. Had a wonderful evening last night.
I heard about your car. That sucks, man.
Yeah, such is life. But it's my own fault.
Well, that's good.
That's the
So
best
I-
part about being a man and a father is you have to accept your accountability. It's
Well-
my fault. I didn't hit anybody and nobody got in an accident. I was turning a corner and it went ding ding, and I went, ooh, phone. And curb check. Oh,
See-
but it wasn't like I smashed into the pole. So the pole has like a base on it, and then the pole's in the middle, and I smacked the base of the pole.
Oh, okay.
Luckily,
Like
so
pole
that's
type
why
thing.
it only put like a smash in the very bottom of the car. So it probably won't cost a lot to fix, but the wheel is undrivable. So a couple of weeks I'll be without a vehicle, whatever. But so
Yeah.
That's okay.
Eh,
yeah, such is life.
Make mistakes. Don't do it again.
Yeah,
stay away from those poles.
yeah. I got to stay off the pole apparently.
The pole
I-
just out in front of you, didn't it?
Yeah, taking pole dancing classes on the weekends apparently.
That was my thought. So, I mean, So, Mr. Pancake, what do you really think about? You've heard a bit of us talk a little here. Where's your mind going with all this?
Well, I guess kind of gotta try and wrap my head around a lot of the stuff you guys are talking about. So like marriage to me is a long-term, permanent life thing. And I know you guys were talking when I first jumped in. I heard you over talking about marriage. Like, well, you're married once. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'm not getting married again. And that is absolutely my mindset. And when I'm religious but not religious. Like I believe in God and I believe in the terms of Christ and follow Christ and all of those types of things. But I don't believe in it as I have to believe in it. And I don't believe in it as like I need to go to church, because I don't believe in church. I think churches, 90% of them are scam and garbage. There are very few that are good churches, like an actual church for the community. And I believe in that type of church as a community church, but I don't believe in like Joel Holstein. Yeah, guys,
Right.
go kill yourself. But as far as like Christ and ideas, I believe in it as an ideology, not because Christ said so. I believe in those ideas because you should believe in those ideas, because for all of human history, as long as you follow this map, this map, you'll be all right.
Which is the best
That's
foundation
the
for
same
belief, right?
idea for marriage,
Right.
right? In my mind, and I didn't believe this forever. I went around and stuck my whistle in every wet hole I possibly could when I was young. But I learned my lesson over the years, and now I pay for it. I pay for it in karma, I guess, if you believe in karma as such a thing. But now, if it doesn't work out with me and my wife, it is going to solely be on her end. Me and her may not work out, but we need to work it out and build together and continue on. That doesn't just because we're in an argument and have been, even if it's a 2-year long fight and we hate each other for 2 years and don't even want to speak to each other, it doesn't mean we get divorced. We figure out a way to get beyond it, move forward, and move on. I don't believe in divorce at all. I can't, she doesn't either, but that doesn't mean she won't change her mind. She is her own human. So if it happens, it'll solely be on her. But once it does happen, again, I'm the same with you. I will never get married again. And more than likely, can't say I won't, but more than likely, I will probably spend the rest of my life using Angela. So, because I'm not one to, marriage to me is, that's it. That's my sexual partner forever. So, yeah, I'm in the same aspect as that. I'm very traditional when it comes to that idea, and I didn't used to be.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I assume that goes without saying. You completely disagree with divorce with nuance, right? Obviously, if a woman, you don't expect a woman to get beat or
right. Yeah,
accept it.
Right. There are stipulations to divorce. I don't believe in 100%. It's the same with abortion. I don't believe in abortion, just like I don't believe in divorce. But there are instances in which case, such is going to happen no matter what. Beating the piss out of your wife every single day. You can't expect her to sit there and accept that forever. Right. Same thing with, it's the same concept with abortion. If you go around screwing a bunch of dudes and get pregnant, it's kind of a responsibility you need to suck it up and accept. You can't just go, I'm going to kill a baby.
It is one of the consequences. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. One of the consequences of having sex, accept accountability and move on. But if you are to and from work and you get raped, or maybe you and your husband are actively trying to have a kid and you get pregnant, and because medical technology these days are on point, maybe they can see inside and they can understand that the child is not only completely mentally incapacitated, is more than likely going to live a life of 3 to 5 years max, but it's going to be a miserable life on top of the fact that it that it medically could potentially hurt the wife and kill her. Yeah. So you combine that stuff, and it's those type of things. No, you're not killing a baby. You're separating a mistake.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough topic to traverse.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. That's why it's a very gray. Yeah. It's a very gray area. It's the same thing with marriage, though. That idea, because it depends on cheating. To me, cheating is something you can figure out and work out. It's wrong. It's divorce worthy, but it's something I feel as though the couple could work out. But what happens if you cheat again and again and again and again? You know what I mean? Then where do you draw the line?
It's also much harder for a man to reconcile the fact that it's much harder for a man to reconcile the fact that he's been cheated on than it is for a woman to.
Right.
Just because we're possessive, jealous by nature, we're competitive. It's
right.
Some men never come to grips with the fact that they've been cheated. You know what I mean?
Cheating for men and women, to me, I've always used like an odd analogy. It sounds like a 2-year-old or a 12-year-old's analogy. Like they got an innie and we got an outie. In a weird way, if you think about that, nobody inserts their entire body and everything into us. I mean, we do it to them.
Yeah.
So in a way, the woman accepts all of this person into her soul, whereas we don't.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely alters the dynamic a little bit, right? I mean, there's always going to be, in some ways, the man is always going to be seen as the perpetrator, I suppose.
Right.
The woman is always the one that's having it done to her. But yeah, you're right. Also, in the same respect, is that. It goes okay. So let's dial it back a little bit, because it goes back to the whole traditional marriage vow thing, right? And the agreement that we have at the beginning of the marriage. One, I mean, there's a biological element to it that makes men just more prone to to jealousy,
Mhm.
particularly in regard to sexuality. But if you think about the structure of the original marriage agreement, right, the man is agreeing to protect this woman and provide for her. And so it makes perfect sense that the most egregious thing that we can think for a man to do would be to beat his wife, right? Because
Yeah.
he's agreed to be the protector, and he's directly contradicting that
Right.
appointment, right? And on the other hand, as a woman, right, she has agreed to, in some ways, to give herself to me, right?
Right.
You know, and now she's gone and given it to someone else. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, those are kind of the two most fundamental ways that we can break the sanctity of the marriage vow. So it makes perfect sense, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly my thoughts. The 2-year-old way to say it is she's got an innie and I got an outie.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's,
what do you agree with the idea that, so my original supposition when he had mentioned it was that, you know, what's the best way to go about improving a marriage? And I said that you know, I feel one of the first ways is to improve yourself. One, you know, treat your wife like a study, like something to be learned. Pay attention, listen, and react accordingly. And then two, you know, focus on improving yourself. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah. I do. I've always believed in, and you know, I'm 100% guilty of not working on myself and doing things that are incorrect in my marriage. Of course, 100%. I learned that the other day. When I mean, you know, she kind of went on this tangent. She's been on an anger streak for like the last like week and a half, and I don't know why, but I'm like, hey, honey, how you doing? I don't fucking know, you know, that kind of deal. Like, odd, very odd. But in the instance, I know, you know, we both have slight mental health issues. You know, me due to military, and her just, you know, due to something in her past. You know, I won't talk about it on here, but
right.
so those causing that, you know, I know this. So after about a good solid week and a half of her basically, you know, for lack of a better word, and for being a silly man, you know, talking like a sissy, you know, she treated me like a week long. Sorry, Philippe.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what happened. So I eventually, you know, by the end of the week, snapped, and I got mad and screamed and yelled at her. But that is, yeah, absolutely something over the years that I should have known better. You know what I mean? I should have worked. I've worked on it a lot, and I'm a lot better over the years. And I agree. As a marriage is going to have those instances very much all the time. You know what I mean? You can't be, you know, the infatuation period or the honeymoon period is just like a year. You know, you know, where you doesn't matter what they do, you're not mad at them. But once that's over, you know, then you have the next year is the learning to live with the person. So you brush your teeth wrong, you chew wrong, you fart wrong, you know, everything is wrong. And then after that, you start to, you know, get into normal life. We're way past that. I mean, we're 10 years, 12 years down the road now by now. So as these years go on, you have to learn to develop information. You have to watch, pay attention. Like you said, treat her as a science project, and, you know, learn her mannerisms, learn her body language, learn her anger. You know, there should have been, for this week, her treating me like that and talking down to me and yelling at me and screaming at me, everything she made her so angry. Honestly, I probably should just been like, I'm sorry, what can I do to help? You know, and I should have taken it all with a grain of salt, because today we're past all that. We stayed up to like 3 a.m. Just we argued. I got pissed off, yelled. She got upset, was quiet. We didn't talk for about an hour, and then we came together, worked it out, talked with each other, and spent till like 3 a.m. talking to her there. And that's something that me and her solely worked on, you know, together for, I mean, shoot, it's been 6 years of working on that. And that is, the fact that we are capable of doing that today is 100% fantastic. You know, I mean, we've been working on this and working on each other and ourselves for years, you know, just because we are both like, we're the exact same personality. You know what I mean? So we're, nobody tells me what to do, like, ever. So when she also has that personality, it's kind of conflicting, but that's how we work on each other. And if you don't do those things, you won't develop a marriage and it won't last, So
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, you need to work on.
I think you touched on a good point there at the end too. Like, so I think young men often make the mistake of work. Maybe it's not a mistake at the time, but it certainly becomes one the longer you hold on to the motivation. But they work on themselves for themselves. That's great. Mm-hmm. But marriage is working on yourself for someone else.
Someone else, yeah. And that's actually something I had a conversation with on Facebook, on my people account outside of Pancakes with Advisors, sure. On my human being account. There's a couple past military friends, they were discussing something or whatever, like, and I mean, shorten the summary of the I guess the post that they made originally that I touched in on was F kids suck, who wants kids are terrible. Mm-hmm. So I said, I just didn't think anything of it and didn't even realize it was going to come to some sort of conversation, you know what I mean? But I was like, kids are great, what are you talking about? I love to have my kid, and then I left it at that, and then it turned into some other conversation. In the end, what they stopped responding to was when I explained to them, look, I became a man and an adult when I learned to have responsibility for others. When my life was worthless and a waste of time when I spent all of it, dwelled in some hedonistic, self-loathing love triangle with every person, all about me. Everything I did was all about me. And I mean, I don't even work out anymore for me. It hurts. I hate working out today because every bone in my body hurts. I've been beaten up and stabbed and locked in cages and thrown in a prison. I've everything bad you could ever think of has happened to me, and I've been beaten bloody to the inch of my life. So every joint in my body hurts. Right. So when I grab a pair of dumbbells and I curl them, my elbows are just on fire. But I think about it and I go, I guess I gotta be able to pick up my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the other things, a little bit on the perverted side, I gotta be able to last more than 3 minutes,
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely.
Right. Not only does it take me more than 3 minutes to get mine, mm-hmm. It also takes her that. So if I'm over there, if I go, dying, yeah. Well, I mean, come on, neither of us got any sort of satisfaction or pleasure out of it. Making her resent me, making me resent myself, in turn eventually resenting her because why can't she make me get mine? And then she's like, well, he sucks, he's lazy and fat, and then it just kind of turns into it's dominoes from there. So yeah, absolutely. Working out today, and I always joke online about how I'm basically a gorilla. I'm 6 foot, 250 pounds, and I think I measured them the other day. My arms are like 19 and a half inches around. I mean, I'm just like a giant gorilla and heavy, but I still have a big old belly. I have no abs whatsoever. They're in there, but they're 4 inches deep. So, yeah, I'm not over here working out to try and be hot. Otherwise, I'd be eating broccoli and bare chicken every day. Screw that. Right. I smash pizza. I take pizza and a couple beers on the weekend. I'm a man and a dad. I like that stuff. It's good. It's yummy.
Yeah.
And personal development's all about balance too. Anyway, I mean, right. So the concept that I have, I don't know if I came up with it, but the idea that I have on personal development is that there's 5 areas of personal development: physical fitness, mental fortitude, emotional intelligence, financial stability, and then spiritual growth or experience is the last one. Right? And you're never going to be like full throttle on all 5 24/7, right? I mean, you see these people on social media, that are just like, they're just like full throttle 24/7, and you're like, yeah, right. That's not
right.
There's no way. You know what I mean? You can look that way for 30, 45 seconds on an Instagram reel. That's fine. But, you know, and I know I keep mentioning Jim Rohn, but going back to him, you know, he tells a story, an anecdote about getting confronted after one of his talks. And one of the listeners was like, hey, Mr. Rohn, you know, you talk about all this stuff, but, you know, how are you doing on it? Right? You know, like, how are you doing, you know, doing all this stuff you talk about? And he's like, let me tell you something. He said, this stuff is a whole lot easier to talk about than it is to do. You know, and it's true. I wish every personal development guru on the internet would admit that willingly, but they don't.
Yeah.
You know, listen, it's a balancing act. You're never going to be, you know, like you mentioned, you're never going to be the Adonis, and at the same time, you know, going to be the Socrates, right? And at the same time, going to be the Bill Gates, and at the same time, you know, it's going to happen. You got to work every one of them against the middle. It's the law of averages. Same with marriages too. You're never going to hit every single thing. But, you know, there's going to be, don't get me wrong. I mean, my wife is a study. I've spent years studying her, like you talked about, sexually, right? And I think we have a pretty good sex life, you know, from both of our points of view. But do I have my off nights? Yeah, of course I do. Every guy does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you know, it's just a matter of making sure that you hit it more often than you don't. Not hit it.
My crazy meds.
I mean, like hit the mark. Yeah, exactly.
My crazy meds turned me into like some sort of like power robot. It sucks. Like I have to like think like a day in advance and be like, okay, lovely wife, I may be grumpy today, but just think about what you're going to get this evening. So I'm not going to take my crazy meds today. And she's like, fine.
At least you guys have a system.
I take medication for like anger outbursts and stuff like that because you know, severe PTSD and all that stuff from the past, and I've learned over the years to develop it and calm down on my own, so medication is less required. But yeah, I still have to take it sometimes. I'm down to like a minimum dose, which is great. So I do try to avoid taking it sometimes just to see if I can get through the day without freaking out on somebody in public. But yeah, that's basically what happens. And when you take that medication, and one of the things you could Google the medication, and one of the symptoms or side effects of it is literal like numbness.
Oh.
Yeah. No, you can go. You literally turn into like a porno star, you know what I mean? Like everything works as advertised, and probably even better than advertised because of the medication, but there's no O at the end. That never comes. That never comes. Wait, what? Sorry. Bleep that one out. But yeah, it never ends. So it's basically me making her happy and accepting my own defeat.
Yeah. Let me do this. Not to push us back to a thing, but one is I kind of want to get away from talking about Mr. Pancake's sex life, but
sorry,
because
it's a good time. Everybody likes hearing about it.
I have no interest in picturing you. Whatever. That's
have you ever seen the reel? If you there's a reel on Facebook where it'll have like, it's like a slow techno song, and the guy's like looking at a book, and then it randomly switches to a giant gorilla like pounding into something else. There's image in your head now. That's what it looks like.
Thanks. Let's go back. Let's go back to Tom, because there is one thing I know that time's starting to get short for him, but one thing I kind of want to find out about is you mentioned that you have a accountability group. That's something you have going. What is that all about?
Yeah, so it's a new project that I've been working on. Right now I've got 10 guys going through a beta test of the community. It's called the Fellowship. Essentially, it is a men's accountability and personal development group that's focused on goal setting and traditional masculine values. And so basically some of the aspects of the group is that there's a larger group, and then each there are groups of 5 individuals that are called cohorts. And so each individual cohort will have once a week, they will have an accountability call. It's an hour, so the maximum amount of time that you'll ever be mandated to be present will be an hour, and it can adjust based on your schedule and in agreement with the other members of your cohort. And then over the course of the accountability call, you're essentially saying, did I or did I not complete my goals from the previous week? These are my goals for the following week. And then there will be a time at the end of the call for getting advice and stuff like that from the other members of your cohort. So that's the bread and butter. And then also there are weekly discussions called Around the Campfire, where we talk about different masculine values, what they mean, how to develop them, some of the consequences of modern society against that particular value, just whatever the discussion kind of brings up. So that's the other kind of piece of the bread and butter of the group. But other than that, it's mostly just it's just like it sounds, fellowship. It's a group for men to get together and talk about problems that are facing them, get advice from other men that may be more experienced in different areas. Luckily, the first 10 guys have been great. It was a nice little mixture of random people. But I'm taking members for the wait list right now. So if you go to my Twitter page and you click the link in my Twitter page and sign up for my email list, all those people will be getting a blast out as soon as the group goes mainstream. We're about 2 weeks in at this point. So we're going to see how everything goes. I'm going to try to work out the kinks, any bugs that I see, and then from there we'll roll it out. But so far the reception has been great. Another kind of aspect of the group that is worth mentioning is everything is legislative in nature. So obviously I'm running the group, but then each individual cohort will elect a cohort leader, and myself and the cohort leaders will come together and collaborate on things to do with the group. So topics of discussion, any new features or new channels that need to be added, anything like that. And then inside each individual cohort, there's going to be like voting and elections that take place. So elect to decide the cohort leader, and then they can elect to make changes in their own little cohort. And every cohort is kind of like independent. So I have a few mandates that you have to follow as far as how the accountability meetings unfold, but ultimately you have a lot of autonomy when it comes to developing your own cohort. And then the benefit of that for me is that when I come together and meet with all the cohort leaders at the end of the week, they can kind of tell me like, hey, this is what we did, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, and then I can use that to kind of build the group out as a whole. So,
all right, what's some of the benefits that you've seen the cohorts that you've been working with in beta actually getting from it? Because don't get me wrong, like for me, talking with different dads and things on this podcast, one, I get to vent my stupidity and my random thoughts that kind of help me get it out. Mr. Pancakes, weirdly enough, listening to some of his random stories, and maybe not the little wee adventures that he has, but the other things that he says helps me out as well. Because one thing that us dads and men in general have is we don't talk to other guys. I mean, we talk to our wives, but we're filtering what we're saying, because it's not like I'm going to sit there and watch Old Yeller with my wife and burst out crying because I'm a guy. I might walk out and do the dishes, go, okay.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? It's that whole thing that a lot of men have that mentality, and I'm not excluding it as myself, but that we don't talk about our emotions, and if we do, it's in a very disconnected sense. So, like I said, for me on this podcast, talking does help me quite a bit because I get my thoughts, I get things like that. Not every dad or man has a podcast that ran like this. In your cohort, does that kind of happen where they can be able to connect, get the things that they don't want others to know, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so some of the big benefits I've seen are, and I'll kind of list them off. So first, it doesn't seem to be encouraged in modern culture for men to have intellectual discussions with one another in most of the social environments that we find ourselves, right? So if you walked up to some guy at work and you were like, hey, what does integrity mean to you? They'd be like, talking about, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I need my
Nerd.
lunch. Like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, so that those kinds of conversations are not encouraged in day-to-day social culture. So it's a place for those men to kind of come and talk about these topics that they think about and are important to them, but that may not be part of daily conversation. The other thing is that there's something, and there's a psychological benefit to this as well, is I have a group of people that it's weird. I don't even really have to necessarily respect them or be beholden to them in any kind of concrete way, but having this group of guys that I know at the end of this week or the beginning of this week or whatever, in 1 week, I will be on a call with these 5 men face to face, video calls only, face to face with these 5 men, and I will have to, the first thing I will have to say to them is, I did not complete my goals for the week, right? As a guy, that's just like so devastating to have to do that. And so there's something about that, knowing that moment is coming, that just pushes you all week long. Like, man, I'm not going to be that guy this week that's going to stand up in front of the cohort and be like, hey, I dropped the ball. You don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? And so a lot of guys don't have an opportunity like that where they're being held directly accountable for accomplishing the goals they set forth for themselves this week. Most of the time it's just tangible, you know what I mean? And maybe you and your wife will have a discussion about it occasionally, or maybe you'll talk to a buddy about it, but there's no concrete moment where they have to pay the piper, as it were, right? So having that moment in the week is a huge benefit to a lot of those guys. The other thing is having other men from different walks of life that have different kinds of experience to come to ask questions to. Hey, it could be anything. It could be something as mundane as like, man, I've been trying to keep my garden clean and I keep getting all these weeds in there. And some guy's like, well, I've been gardening for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I do. You know what I mean? So there's those mundane things. And then there's also issues with my wife, like, hey man, I don't know what's going on. Like, my wife has just been whatever, throwing a fit all week. She's been pissed off all week and I don't know what the hell the problem is, And then Mr. Pancakes come on there and he'd be like, well, this is what worked for me. You know what I mean?
Make her some pancakes and she'll know.
Exactly. Don't take your psych meds today so that you guys can.
So we can pound out the meat and cook it on the grill.
Yeah.
There you go.
So those are the big 3 benefits I see for men, is just, like I mentioned, and it's making a huge difference,
And that makes sense. And yeah, like I said, I can see how that would work out in all this. So, I mean, with that, I know that, like I said, your time was coming close from what you said you had.
Yeah, I got to get out of here. Yep.
Yeah, so with that, let's do this. I'm going to put in your links into the show notes, but for the people that don't want to take the time to read it and they just want to hear you say it, where can they find you if they have questions, things like that?
Yeah, so, Twitter X at earnherrespect.com is, at earnherrespect is my Twitter handle. So you can find me there. There's a link in my profile that has the email list I described. It has a couple other links on there too. You can set up a free 30-minute call with me if you're interested in personal coaching. There's also currently a free copy of, I call it my 10 Tough Questions workbook. It's the same 10 questions that I put my coaching clients through on day one. It's kind of an opportunity. It guides you through laying out a plan for the man that you want to become and changing the behaviors that need to be changed in order for you to get there. It's really useful. So that's there for free as well in the link in my profile. And then also, if you get on my email list, you'll get updates about when the fellowship opens up, and you'll get updates for when my book is done, which I'm still working on them currently. When I get off here, I actually have some more research to do. So it's called Chivalry and Courtship. It's essentially a modern day dating and marriage guide for young men that want to develop traditional marriages in a modern culture. So that'll be coming out too. So yeah, get on the email list and you'll get updates for all that stuff.
Sounds good. I'm definitely going to have to sign up for that because one, I definitely want to know when that book comes out. But
yeah, for sure.
And with Mr. Pancakes, where do you want people to find you to hear all your crazy little stories or
My
whatever
shenanigans.
your shenanigans? Yes.
Well, for the most part, the majority of my shenanigans are on the show. So, best place to hear my shenanigans. I do now and again share a story, but on the Pancakes socials and stuff, I do keep it very, very clean. Just because there is a lot of kid-friendly stuff attached to my show or my Pancakes page. You know, Pancakes, duh, right? And the Justice Frogs books as well. But the main place would definitely be pancakeswithyourdad.com. That'll take you right to the website with all the resources. You know, we're working plans for free. There's definitely some digital products to download. You do have a course on there for LinkedIn, optimization to kind of help you build your LinkedIn if you're looking to kind of boost your career, build your career, maybe even use it for business purposes, whatever. It'll definitely help you. But that's the best place. It'll have the links to all of my socials, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, True Social, and there was an Instagram, but when I get a few minutes, when I'm done dealing with my automobile fun, I'm planning on making an Instagram again because my other one got shut down for some odd reason, but whatever. I guess Facebook doesn't like my stuff. I'm a bad person for,
They like waffles.
I'm trying. Right, they like waffles. Correct.
That's what it is.
And not marriage or conservatism. So anyways, but those are the best places. But other than that, pancakeswithdad.com.
Perfect. And then of course, callwithdads.com. You find all of our stuff there. And right now, Mr. Pancake and I are working on getting together a consulting or a coaching for people. Obviously, him and I have different directions that we do. I obviously am more of the talker, more of the let's think it through kind of thing. Mr. Pancake, he's highly focused on helping dads build their careers, build a future, build a stable life. And you can talk to him as well. You've heard at this point, anyone listening heard us talk enough. They know which one of us they feel they're going to be more comfortable talking to about whatever. So there is that there. So right now you just go to the contact us on the Call with Dads. And while you're there, you can find the podcast, find our social medias for Call with Dads and anything else we have. We have articles and all these things. Now, we're setting out to try to also grow your awareness of different things going on. We have a newsletter where in this newsletter, we have any articles you might have missed. You can find there the coming shows, and it's telling you coming guests, as well as we're going to have our guest that comes on, has been on, be able to post things. So like Tom, when his book comes out, hopefully he lets us know. It'll be in the newsletter for anyone that wants to be part of this. They can get that and find out. We keep it simple, to the point, not a whole lot to worry about we're going to give you a whole long story of craziness or what's have you. Mr. Pancake's good for that. I handle the newsletter, so it's not happening there. Other than that, Tom, I appreciate you being here again.
Of course.
I hope this is definitely not the last time because obviously we have good conversations.
It's always a pleasure, man. I love chatting with you guys.
Yeah, so this is definitely not the last time, and we're definitely going to go into maybe next time we go into accountability, things like that, focused in that area. So, or even your book. When your book comes out, you come and talk to us about that. So
yeah, that sounds great.
I mean, we have 2 more episodes with you, obviously, to schedule. So with that being said, I appreciate you coming back again. I hope you take it easy. If you can hold on for me just for a moment, I'm going to end this for everyone else, but you and I and Mr. Pancake will talk for another minute.
Okay.